Hi everyone, welcome to lecture 6, and we're going to be looking at daycare. So specifically we're going to look at the effects of daycare on social development. So what we mean by social development is we mean aggression and peer relations. So you need to learn these 4 key studies, which I'm going to describe later on. So what they're going to ask you, they're going to be focusing on either peer relationships or aggression, or even both. It doesn't matter. So as long as you know that social development refers to peer relations and aggression. So peer relationships is just basically how we develop our friendships or how we interact with other people the same age as us. So let's look at some studies on peer relations. So the first study I'm focusing on is Clark, Stewart et al. And they found a positive relationship between the children who attended daycare and children who stayed at home. So children who attended daycare, they found that they were more advanced and they're more independent and they're able to interact better with their peers. So that is a nice study which shows that daycare can have a positive impact on our relationships with people the same age as us. One thing you need to know, especially when it comes to our limitation, is that they use a correlation study. They found a positive relationship or a link between going to daycare and having loads of friends. Um, yes, correlational studies do tell us that there's a relationship between two things. However, what about other factors? We can't say that one thing caused another, so we can't infer a causal relationship. We can just say that there is a relationship. So we need to think about other factors that could be involved. For example, the home life environment of the children that they use, or their intellectual, their IQ, their general IQ in the first place. So other factors could have affected why they're having more friends in the first place. Yeah, it could be out in a home environment that their parents host dinner parties every weekend, and people come with their friends, and the friends have children, so there's plenty of opportunity to develop these peer relations. Or it could be that these children have loads and loads of brothers or sisters, so they kind of develop their interactions anyway at home. So be very, very careful. Know, especially with correlational studies, so you have to know how to evaluate it and always talk about other factors. Some strengths. The thing about this daycare research is that some researchers will say it's bad, so bad on peer relations. Some will say it's good. So there's no conclusive evidence, and that is the issue. That is a problem. So you can say that because there's no conclusive evidence, maybe we need to start looking at factors of good quality daycare instead. And finally, it could just be the child's temperament. It may not be the fact that that child is actually just going to daycare. It could be that some kids, we looked at temperament earlier on, personality types are just different. Some kids are going to be introverted. Some children are going to be extroverted. And obviously, when you're more extroverted, you kind of like speak to people more and become a bit more of a people person. So you have to be very, very aware of these kind of stuff. Another study we're looking for peer relations is by Field in 1991, and again another correlational study. They found that the more time that children spent in full-time daycare, the more friends that they had once they started school. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. But the problem with, again, the problem comes with correlational studies. It's a big one in looking at daycare studies, and exactly the same as before. So we can use exactly the same evaluation points. So it could just be the child's temperament, and again, no conclusive evidence. So then we're going to be looking at daycare and aggression, and we've got 2 more studies as well. The first study, we've got the NICHD, so think of CHD as child, so NI child report. And again, it was a longitudinal study, and they looked at 1,000 children from diverse families in different locations. And what they found is that the more time a child spends in daycare, the more aggressive they're more likely to be, and in terms of having a lot of behavioral issues. So they found a really negative impact of daycare on children in terms of aggression. So again, we can use the same evaluation points. There are problems with correlational studies. What about the home environment? What if that child experiences violence in the home environment in the first place? We don't know that. Yeah, so with correlational studies, we can infer that there is a relationship between two things, but we can't say one thing caused another thing. Again, problems with longitudinal studies, we don't know. So in terms of attrition, we don't know the people who are off the radar. So we just lost them. They've gone AWOL. So we don't know if those children, for example, turned out to be aggressive. What the study is, a good positive thing about the study though is it did find that the more sensitive mothers are, the more the less likely the child will be in terms of becoming aggressive. So it wouldn't matter how long a child stayed in daycare. They found that as long as a mother's quite sensitive to the child's needs, it can counteract the effects. And then a second study for aggression is the EPPE study. And what they done is a big project that's taken place, and it was in a whole well in the whole of Europe. And they were again a longitudinal study, and they were looking at children between the ages of 3 and 7 who attended a daycare setting. And what they also done as well, they found children who didn't go to daycare, for example, who stayed at home with their parents. And they done this so they can compare these children who went to daycare to these people. 3,000 children, quite a high number. And what happened is that when the children started school, they got the teachers to rate them in terms of their behaviour. And when you rate people, obviously, you have to some kind of questionnaire where you're ticking off if they display any particular types of behaviour. And what they found that the teachers rated those children who spent longer in daycare as being more antisocial and having more behavioural difficulties. They also found that high quality daycare reduced the negative impact. So in terms of real world applications, it just means make sure daycare is of good, proper, high quality. So obviously now we have things like Ofsted happening in nurseries now, where they come to inspect the nurseries to make sure it's of good quality standard. Negatives here, it was only done in Europe, so I'm keeping it simple here. What about other particular countries that are not in Europe? So population validity issues here. And then finally, teachers rated them. So sometimes when your teacher has to observe behavior, they may be sometimes a bit biased, or they may not be telling the full truth. Or what if the child just doesn't get on with the teacher in the first place, or the teacher doesn't get on with the child? So sometimes questionnaires can be a bit biased, and it depends on who's actually doing them in the first place. And that is it. So there's only 4 studies really to learn for daycare in terms of aggression and peer relations. Make sure, please do learn it, because a lot of people leave this bit out for some reason, but they quite like asking questions on this particular section. So only 4 studies here. So NICHD report, that is aggression, negative effects in terms of aggression. EPPE study, aggression, negative effects. Clark Stewart, peer relations, positive. Field, peer relations, positive. Just knowing those 4, you'll be able to answer any single examination question that they could throw at you for the summer examinations. Also, for those that don't know, daycare. Yeah, daycare, temporary care outside the home, and it's usually not given. So it's not given by family members. Okay, you don't stay there. Unlike institutions where you have to stay there, daycare, you come home every day. So they might ask you for examples. So give examples like childminders, nurseries, or playgroups. Something you go to for a few hours and you come home. Okay, so I'll see you in lecture 6A when we're going to look at key examination questions for this particular section.